好了说，当然了，现在哪的？
We will begin with the opening prayers.
Chini give us an
You can all hear me, right? You can all hear me, right? Can you hear me? Okay. So today is the first day of the Arya Chema spring teachings. So I'd like to extend my greetings to everyone listening and watching over the internet, all the lamas, tulkus, and spiritual friends, the monks and nuns from the monasteries and nunneries, and in particular the nuns who are participating in the Arya Chema spring Dharma teachings, and all of our Dharma friends who are listening from all parts of the world, and all of my fellow Tibetans at home and abroad. So I'd like to offer my greetings and wishes that you are well. Now, in particular, it is not long since the Tibetan New Year of the Tiger. So I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. I hope that you all are healthy and that all you may accomplish all your wishes according to the Dharma. So starting from today, for the next month, we'll once are the gathering together and continuing the teachings on the liberation story of MIKYÖ DORJE. So this is a good fortune that we all have. Now, as you all, of course, know, these days in the world, all over the world, there's the epidemic, there are famines, and there are conflict and war. And so in this time, when it's a difficult time for the world, the fact that we have a little bit of leisure, a bit of time, and ability to practice the Dharma is something that we really need to rejoice in, something that we should find amazing. And at the same time, another thing we must not forget is that, for example, if you think about the country of the Ukraine, like the country is reeling under the terrors and sufferings of war night and day without respite. Similarly, in the country of Afghanistan, there are millions of people who have nothing to eat, and they're living under famine. In many other countries, such as Syria, there's conflict and fighting that have happened. And because of this, many people have had to leave their homelands and go to other countries where they have defensive and have no protection. And there are many people who have such desperate and difficult suffering situations. Now, we always hear about these according to the news, but it's important for us to remind ourselves of them over and over again. When we remind ourselves of them over and over again, and when we, normally for the sake of some trifling pleasure, we'll fight with others. And so even though we are in the best of circumstances, we still aren't dissatisfied with them. We always tell of our resentment to others. We speak behind people's backs. We look for incite conflict. If you look at this, it's actually like just even more insane than insane. So at the same time that we have such a wonderful situation, we don't recognize that. And so we get like so upset or so get too insane about it, neurotic about it, that at that time that we need to recognize this. We need to recognize this. We need to know it. And when we understand and recognize this, what we need to think about is that right now we do have a little bit of pleasure and freedom, and we need to use that for a great purpose. We must not let this go to worse. So after this really strong feeling that I really need to do this, that I have a very deep feeling I need to do it, this is very important. So normally, before we teach the dharmas, we have like the reminder of the motivation. We always say that it's important to remember your motivation. When we talk about changing your motivation or fixing your motivation, is if you think about it in this way, so you need situations like this, you need to change your motivation. If you don't think about the actual situations and actual lives and the happiness and suffering of sentient beings and think just like, oh, I'm going to become a Buddha. If we only think in that way, then our thinking is just getting way too vague. And there's no point, little point, actually, real pointer. We actually have to think about the actual lives, the actual situation in the world, the actual suffering of sentient beings. We have to think about that. And then we need to change our motivation. If we just sort of have some sort of abstract thought, I'm going to achieve Buddhahood, and so think about whatever we want without any connection to the actual level, there's not much point to that, and I don't think that there is any benefit to it. Now, as most of you who are listening today, generally we talk about Karmapa and MIKYÖ DORJE. You say he's renowned as a great scholar, but this is not only in the Karma Kamsang or in the Kagyu lineages. He is also, within all of the Tibetan Buddhist schools, he is the most well-known Kagyu scholar. Likewise, among all of the successive karmas, there have been 16 up to now, and among them, in terms of his commentaries on the middle way, the Prajnaparamita, the Vinaya, and the Abhidharma, he wrote many commentaries on these. And he wrote many texts on connected to mantra. And so in terms of the influence of his speech, he is the most influential. So therefore, reading his liberation story and studying his liberation is, if no matter how you look at it, is extremely important, I believe. And in particular, for Kagyu Shadow students. So in general, of course, in these days, in most modern schools, there's a study of history, but we, within our Shadras, we don't have any particular courses on history. We don't teach it. And especially we don't even really know the liberation stories of the masters who wrote our textbooks like MIKYÖ DORJE. And this is really, it's like a very embarrassing and really quite terrible situation. There's an ancient Tibetan historical text called the Langibodhi Siru. And what it says is people who do not know their ancestry are like monkeys in a jungle. Like we're humans, right? And we're born as in the human body. But once we're born in this human body, if we don't know the histories of the previous generations, and how they've descended, we need to know that. And if we don't know that, then we're the same as a monkey in a jungle. People who do not know their maternal lineage are like a fake turquoise dragon. So if you don't know your own maternal lineage, so your clan and your maternal lineage, if you don't know these, then you might think I'm something special. Whether you become well-known or not, the main point is that you're actually like a fake turquoise gem. The turquoise gem makes a big noise, but actually there's really not much to it. And actually it really doesn't have much, there's not much point to it. Likewise, those who don't know their forebears' heritage are like moon children who have left their homelands. If you don't know your forebears' history and you don't know the documents, listen, if you don't know that, then if you're like a person who has been just left there, gone to another lens and has absolutely no knowledge about their own place or where they're from. That's what we're like. And so what we actually really need to do, if we think about it in worldly terms, or whether we think about it in terms of Dharma terms, in any case, we need to know our descent and our source, our origins. It's important for us to understand our ancestry and origins, and that's a really important point for us to know this. Generally, when we think about the stories of MIKYÖ DORJE's liberation, there are some that MIKYÖ DORJE himself wrote, and there are also some that were written by a student. So there are these two different types. There are the autobiographical ones, and then there are ones that are written by his students. So there are these two different types of liberation stories of MIKYÖ DORJE. And MIKYÖ DORJE's own liberties mostly, instead of being written in prose, are mostly written in verse. They're more in verse than in prose. The majority are in verse. And so among these several different autobiographies in verse, the most well-known these days the most well-known is one called The Praise He Searched Himself. The Praise He Searched Thoroughly is the one that's most well-known. Now, the reason why this praise he searched thoroughly became the most well-known primarily comes down to the fact that the praise he searched thoroughly is included in the Karma Kamsan prayer books. So it's something that we've all heard about or read. So this praise he searched thoroughly is the one that became the most well-known. And particularly within the prayer books, there is this praise he searched thoroughly, and the words are actually quite thorny. They're very difficult. And it's kind of hard for people to get to understand them. So when you're memorizing it, when you're memorizing this praise he searched thoroughly, is actually rather difficult. And so many old monks have told me that when you're memorizing you're memorizing this praise he searched thoroughly, it's actually the most difficult of prayers among all the different prayers you have to memorize. And when I was little myself, and I had to memorize the praise he searched thoroughly, I also had a bit of difficulty with it, I remember. However, when you're memorizing things as a child, the ones that are the most difficult are the ones that you can never forget because you worked so hard at them. And because you got beaten by your teacher, and so you remember them well. And so later, when you become an adult, then you think about it. Remember, the ones that were hard to memorize are the ones you just don't forget. You can remember them easily. But generally, when we memorize prayers when we're little, we kind of force ourselves to memorize the words. But in terms of the meaning, the teachers don't explain much. They probably don't even know how to explain them. It's not that they know and they don't explain, it's just that they themselves don't understand and don't teach them. And then we, for ourselves, we're just trying to memorize them. We're just thinking about memorizing them. We don't take much interest in what they actually mean. But actually, these autobiographical praises have an incredibly vast and profound meaning. If we take this praise that he searched thoroughly, one of the most famous books, Tibetan Dharma history, is The Feast for Scholars by Pema Pao Tsular. So within this text, The Feast for Scholars, there is a liberation story of MIKYÖ DORJE. And so like the framework, the primary structure of the biography is built around this praise he searched thoroughly. So within the liberation story of MIKYÖ DORJE, of in the Feast for Scholars, he cites all the lines as you search thoroughly from the very beginning to the end, and he connects it all with a very detailed discussion of MIKYÖ Dorje's life story. So among all the liberation stories of MIKYÖ Dorje that we can still have these days, I think it's fair to say that this one written by Pao Zula-Chengma is the longest and the most complete. Now, if we think about it in terms of the Tibetan text, it is 33 folios, right? So when we think about the pages that are, then it's like 67 pages. So within the Feast for Scholars, this biography of MIKYÖ Dorje is like 10% of the history of the Karmakaji lineage. And so it's only 9 stanzas long, but it has such a vast, and it covers a lot of subject matter. And it covers all the major and minor points. And if we don't take some interest in it and study and research it, there's no way we can understand in it. Only when we take some interest and research it, then we can say that, oh, there's such a long life story of MIKYÖ Dorje in the Feast for Scholars. And if we look at it, oh, wow, the framework for this is the praise we search thoroughly, and we can get that certainty from thinking in this way. Likewise, there's also the autobiographical versus the good deeds. Let me talk about what this is. It's like, it talks about all of the good deeds or the good acts of the good things that MIKYÖ Dorje did in his life. He thinks about what are the most important good acts. And he tells them all in this autobiographical verses, the good deeds. So in this way, not only is this autobiographical versus good deeds an important summary of his life, and so it is something that for us, our students and followers, we can particularly say that like this is like that if we want to be like a Lama who's learned, venerable, and good, then that's how we should need to be. This is the way to. It's like an example for us, an important aim for us. And so these autobiographical verses, the good deeds, are really crucial. But in the last year or two, I've been talking with you a lot about history and biography and liberation stories. It's quite possible that you can think that it's like there's no end to the stories that Eakin's going to tell. It's possible that you might be thinking about this. Some people might think that what we need is a philosophy. Need are the meditation instructions. And instead, he's teaching all these stories and biographies that we don't need, that are no point to us. It's possible that there might be some of you who think like this, who have this idea. And if you think that there's no point and there's no need, if you're thinking about it in terms of the individual who's actually teaching it, if you're thinking, then it's exactly that. I can't say it. It's exactly as you say. And so me, as the person telling the teaching, as someone who's like a substance and I'm not someone who has substance or who has anything to say. For someone like me to sit in front of you and pretend that there's a point or a reason, to pretend to be wise and learned is like saying, like when you have a Tibetan saying, when there are no birds, then the donkeys rule the sky, and when there are no dogs, the cats gnaw on bones. It's the same. We've gotten to the situation, there's like no choice. It's not like saying that there's nothing turned out really well or that it's a whole lot of fun. But if you think about the liberation stories that I'm taking, if you think that there's no point and that there's no need for them, then I don't think that that is the right way of thinking. Generally, when we think about in this world, there are many different religions. And many religions assert that there is a creator deity, some god, or you can say a god or a lord or whatever, who's created the world. This is what they teach. And most of these religions that say that there's a creator god, this creator deity, say that the creator deity has given advice to all of us in the world. And these come via a messenger, a prophet, who are able to communicate the God's worlds exactly to us. For example, within Christianity, or the issue that said, like the teacher of Christianity is like a messenger of God, and it's through him that he's actually teaching human beings, communicating the words exactly. But what is the creator deity itself? Then it's like transcends humans. It's like ineffable. It's so completely far away from us. It transcends humans. Our situation, the creator deity situation, are completely different. And there's no way that we can become like the creator deity. That's what it says, right? Now, I don't know this in detail, but in general, this is what I know. However, in Buddhism, our teacher, if you think, we don't say that, for one thing, we don't say that there is a creator God. And our teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni, came in a human form, and he actually came to this world. He came to this world. He ate human food. He wore human clothes. He lived a human life. In brief, in that human life, he came and performed the 12 great deeds, and in many different and performed many other actions as well. Now, the main reason, purpose for the Buddha appearing in this way is that primarily that we ordinary individuals, if we put the effort in, can also become like a Buddha, an individual with wisdom, love, and power. We can become like that. And the methods for making this happen are not just something that the Buddha taught, or merely a message that has been passed on through someone else. The Buddha, with his own body, he showed us, obviously, right before us, practically how to do it. And so if you think about even just this one situation, I think we can get an idea of how important the deeds of our teachers and the liberation stories of the gurus are for us Buddhists. Otherwise, if we think that there was some voice that taught the Four Noble Truths and the three baskets, the three pitakas from the middle of an empty sky, then we wouldn't have this, like, no one is actually showing us what to do, but there's just words coming from the sky. I don't think that would be much hard for us. It's difficult for actually to practice. And the reason is that there wouldn't be actually someone to give us actual direction, someone to actually give us experienced instruction. There wouldn't be any teacher of the path or any spiritual friend. And then our practice would be really difficult. So for that reason, we Buddhists, so Buddhism is not a religion that just teaches a complicated philosophy. It's a primarily meditation practice. It's turning the mind inside and changing the mind. That's the kind of religion, the kind of practice that it is. And in order to practice, we can never be separate from the guru, the spiritual friend. And we talk about the guru and spiritual friend. If we think about it from the distant perspective, it is like the teacher, the Buddha. It is the 8 great listener disciples, the 7 elders, the 6 ornaments of the 2 supreme ones. We can talk about many such great beings, but if we think about it in terms of the close, it's our own kind root guru. And so their deeds and their stories of liberation that they tell themselves are, in terms of actual practice, are like living, breathing dinner, the Dharma. There's something we can actually see, something we can actually feel and understand. And that gift that they're giving us is extremely important, extremely sacred. So in brief, the deeds that the great mystics of the past performed in their lives are like direct instructions in the practice of the true Dharma. And so it is important for us to consider them as significant and important, to study them and to put them into practice. This is really important. And so for this reason, in Tibetan, when we talk about the biographies of great masters, we don't call them biographies as would normally called. Instead, they're called by the specific name liberation stories. So, of course, I did speak quite a bit about this last year, but in order to remind you, I thought I'd review it now. So first of all, we need to understand what is the reason why we call the biographies of the great beings liberation stories, or namtar in Tibetan. In order to understand this, we first need to understand what liberation means. How should we understand liberation? What does liberation mean? We need to understand that. And once we understand that, then we need to understand what is the reason why these biographies are called liberation stories. Now, this word liberation comes from the Sanskrit word. And what is liberation in Sanskrit is from the word vimoksha. If we translate that directly into Tibetan, it's namratarpa, or that means liberation or emancipation. And so the long form would be namratarpa in Tibetan. So it would be condensed into namtar, so that in English we say liberation. Now with that, in terms of the Kadampa tradition, they talk about the 3 types of individuals, right? They divide all of Buddhist practice into 3 different sections, like the stages of the path of the lesser individual, the stages of the path of the middling individual, and the stages of the path of the greater individual. They're divided into these 3 types of individuals. Likewise, when you think about liberation, there are 3 different levels of that. There are scholars who describe it as this. For example, when you think about the lesser type of individual, that because of having faith, the pure faith of believing in karmic cause and effect, then they achieve liberation from rebirth in the 3 liberal realms. And so this is the liberation of the lesser individual. When we think about the middling type of individuals, so because of having a pure wish for emancipation from all samara, for the pure motivation, and there's the liberation of the ocean of samsara. So that is the liberation of the middling type of individual. For greater individuals, just because of having the pure altruistic intention to benefit others, there's the liberation from both extremes of existence and peace. So that sort of liberation is the liberation of the greater type of individual. I think this is probably a good place to have our break. So we will have now our half-hour break, and then we will continue.
DORJE Chebo namje kweta da, cheba namje seda da, kombo namje chuda da, tongwa shimbo to prajo, cheba namje nadojo, nyanye nyamda gadojo, ije namja yise shen, temba bezo so prajo, semje neba shinye ma, nyudo nene tajo je, prove nene ma neba, tato jowa me prajo, taba namne jime sho, jimba namne rawajo, tambe namne tete je, benze semne nyedro, jamba namne tamje la, chona tamje devrajo, kange denda joje ba, debe me de joje, joda joje shubha na, yila samba joje de, chuye mozo derje ne, nyeda leje gavrajo, nyama lagwa chamba na, chamba dada jeje, chungge daso jingme ma, minga de la tongvajo, gursa la me nyama wa, chiba gembo gemme, yelo nyeshe ramye na, mada songwa chebrajo, mida kunle darwa na, deda shera zedeje, seda cheba bunzo ne, dado sera chebrajo, tamje namba zushe do, longje cheba me brajo, seba me je tsime ba, rawa dune chebrajo, semje sije chumba ba, deda sije chebrajo, bada jenga sungye ba, sosa benzo sobrajo, jide burme chinye ba, deda cheba ni joje, mara namne todorje, mage daja chebrajo, dage sunam diye ne, semje tamje malu ba, dikba tamje pangme ne, tato gewa chebrajo, chanchu semda me joje, chanchu shula shuwa da, sanje namye yoso je, duge ne jabongwa, semje deda tamje ne, tsenya pangme lewajo, tato devra sujro je, chiwe jaya kama, pason shinge jime sa, sanje tane sanje se, chunye chobe kongwa ye, chuna tamje kongwa, tamje dude sashe da, sema la so me bata, late tanya bedro ya, rashi jambo ne joje, koje jimbro ye kuro ya, chancho semba mongbo, rangi lekbe sate da, jimbra zebe shujroje, beje kunje chatane, shinda vese tamje, namba lekya chuje cha, jume sheba tabrajo, deda tato sanje da, sanje seda chuje, chebe jimbo taye me, trove lama chebrajo, naya biso chepe shen, loto biso tsojroje, jabo shushin cheba da, jide da jada rajo, benam tuda kemba da, sama deje jobrajo, kanjo simbo la soba, ninje semda deje, semje gaya duma jo, diba majo namajo, jida nyebra mijo shen, gaya ime de majo, tsuba kana loba da, kade jeje lene jo, tabra gide temba da, gide teya jobrajo, laba debe gemonda, wemba da jada brajo, yewa tamje pane ne, semne le rabam joje, gelo mana gide shen, tada deba bongrajo, deshe rando jungwa gen, sujin yamba mi joje, sujin chawe ye jone, tado deba seje jo, deja dane tobjo ne, deyan tosho mi jan, keba namne korwa da, senyor da janye brajo, june yoso da pada, chana kundo chabrajo, yeso dongwa mi shen, kawa cheba me braya, ave lambe le domne, deda sanje nyodojo, semje kunje le mando, sanje tamje shuje, sanje dewa samye ge, dado deda de joje, chancho semba namye ne, jode tola gondoje, kumbo yene kambo ma, semje namla de joje, deshe rasa ge namda, nyede namja de joje, daja jamya katinje, sara kawa to brando, dado sera jemba da, rabdo jungwa jebrajo, dane kase chine jan, nyamda deshe sorajo, sera kundo vene ma, bezo deba to brajo, kanze tauran deba, chungse jibra denayam, kumbo jamya denye ne, gime paya to brajo, shojo namge de tobe, simje kunde dorje shira jamya chese ba dage cheba de dorje chese nam khane ba da towa chese ne jro tese da ne jro ne dove doma sawa dove doma panje ro de ke da la me jro changjo sembo ge de ge towa de la cheba dove doma me je mo de wa tam je jowe ne temba ne da kurde da che de yere ne jro 강게 tenje ke lo jan jambe yang la cha se lo 강게 tenje da da wan ge we she la an da sha zo sanje kun la cha za lo ta so la me de ba ye cha jo se ma nam la ya ne de nam la cha za lo ni do tam je do je je do le ram ne ram de na ba je me ba de je ba cha jo se ma cha za lo sim je wan do je be na da ge de ba che je ma san je chen ra che ne so da ge de da sha pro je da le nam ba sam wa ge sa na so ne je ba de da ge kun je sa be de da ge cha je me se cho jo da ge je na so san je che ba kan jo wa san je che be ye ra wa de la da ne ye ra de ba tam je sha ba je sa na kun la ye ra san je kun la cha za la da ne ye she cha do jo cho jo da ge cha na so sa jo da la ne ba ye chan jo sen ba chan jo jo san je je ba kun ma de chan jo da ba san ge shen de da che be de de so cha kun la me le do che je pa la ba ge je che ma chen ba da ye ne do ma sim je do je jo pa ba che wa sam ye so chu de ze je shu jo de be nam do jin jo je se be se ba nam je ma che wa kun ye jin da la pa ye cha na se so sim je chen ma je pa la san je nam ne me me se sim je nam la cham do de se be so le jo zo be san je ma je na pa da de da ma je ba de da je so da lo je chang je che ba che je pa ro chen de zo je ne do do sim je da je mo je do ba mo je ne la me chang je re do je ma je pa da me jo na ra je ma je ne ma je nam re ma je ne ma je dong be chen ne do bra san je dang so jin ba da sim je ma je so ma je pa sa ma je so ma je da ma je ba ye che do jo da se da gre sim ba ye ma ba kun la me ne sim
那时候，咱能不能给升多？
You can all hear me, can't you? Okay. Now, as I was saying before, the way we should understand the word liberation is, as I explained before. With liberations, there are the liberation stories of the great beings' previous lives, or they can be about the great being's current life. They're not necessarily, when we say the liberation story, that it means the story of only this lifetime and not of another lifetime. You can think about their previous lifetimes also. The stories of these also can be called liberation stories. For example, when you think about the 12 different types of scriptures, there are the Jataka tales. Now, the Jataka tales are a type of literature that tells where a teacher, the Buddha, was born in his previous lifetimes as a bodhisattva, what types of hardships what he went through. So there are texts or this genre of literature that describes this. And so in this way, is it not just about the 12 deeds of the Buddha, but also in the previous times when he was performing the acts of a bodhisattva, undergoing the path, how he was born, what efforts and what hardships he went through. And so these are another type of genre of literature. So what is the reason why they're called by the name liberation stories? So generally, when we think about the greatest difference between a liberation story and the biography of an ordinary individual is that liberation stories do not relate how an ordinary person led their life, or how they thought, or what their activities were. That's not what the liberation stories are about. Instead, when we say liberation story, we're necessarily speaking about a great being, the liberation story of a great being. And that liberation story, and there are qualities of listening, contemplating, and meditating. They're different than other people's. And in particular, how they engaged in the true study of the listening, or how they contemplated and how they meditated the Buddha's teachings. That's what they speak about. And because of their true study of listening and contemplating, how they developed scholarly qualities, for example, the teachings of teaching, debate, and composition. When we think about the venerable qualities, like the not transgressing the precepts of the 3 types of vows, think about the qualities of practice. There is the developing the extraordinary realization of the path within their being, how they developed experience and realization. When we think about the qualities of goodness, when you think about their vast activity of benefiting the teachings of all sentient beings in total, when we relate these either orally or when they're recorded in writing, then the individuals who hear or see those liberation stories can increase their uncontrite faith and devotion. And because of increasing the faith and devotion in their mind, then those followers and disciples can at least become for them at least an object of their aspiration, something, may I become like that, something that we can aspire to, something that we can supplicate or pray for. And so this genre of literature is called by the name liberation story. So when you talk about the liberation story, and it must have these features. So in brief, it says the Drugyawang Kunga Peljor said, through the form of its topic and language, it must become a cause for students who see and hear it to reach to liberation and omniscience. This is what he said. And so when we're teaching the liberation stories of the great beings, the teacher of the liberation story and the listeners to the liberation story must understand the reason why the liberation story must be taught. And if they understand that, then they can see, can they develop within their mind streams either the faith of a sincere faith or longing faith or the faith of conviction. Even if they can't develop all three of them, if they can develop any one of those three types of faith, if they're able to develop any of those three types of faith, then what is the feature of that, or the benefit of doing this? That's what we call awakening the potential of their family, or planting the seed of liberation. We often say this, planting the seed of liberation. When you talk about planting the seed of liberation, this comes down to whether or not we've developed faith within our beings. If we're able to develop faith, if we're able to develop faith in the great objects of faith, such as the three jewels, then that is the benefit. So the basic point is that the liberation story must be has to have three points. The first feature is it must be about a great being. It can't be about just an ordinary being. And then the topic of this of the liberation story needs to be directly connected to the true Dharma. If it's not connected to the Dharma, if it's about a worldly, if it's only about overcoming enemies and protecting your friends, then it's not a liberation story. The other thing is that it must be able to instill longing, inspiration in people of all levels. And so in brief, a liberation story must, in general terms, have all three of these features. Now, normal when we're reading like the kanji, or the words of the Buddha, and we're opening this and we look at what it says at the beginning of every sutra, every text is, "Thus have I heard at one time," it says. So this phrase comes up over and over again. Well, it just reminds me of a story. Or maybe I need to tell this story. It's kind of a strange story. I don't need to tell the whole story, but I can tell half the story. I think that's enough. Once there were some Mongolian people who came to Lhasa to study. So these Mongolians, they were monks, and they came to Lhasa to study at the great monasteries, Serjepung and Serjepung in there, and there's Ganden, which is also close by Lhasa. So these Mongolians came. So many Mongolians would come to study in Lhasa and Mongolian. So at one point, there were 7 Mongolians who came to study in Lhasa. But these 7 Mongolians, they were originally from a really remote place, and so they really didn't have much of a, hadn't had much education. They really didn't have a very wide knowledge. They didn't have much experience, and so when they came from their homeland, their parents gave them some advice. Now, when you're going and you're traveling, you need to protect each other. You need to help each other out. And so the parents gave them this advice, and in particular, they told them when they were going down, when they're traveling. It's a difference if they get lost. Is you need to count. You need to count how far you're going. You need to calculate how far you're going. So they'd count every day. Of course, they said. And so they left from their homeland, and they went and they departed. And the next day, as they're coming down the travel, they were counting. And they're counting. See, each person was counting. They counted each person. And they're counting each person. And the person who was kind of counted himself, he didn't count himself. It's counting everyone. It's turning out and looking at everyone else. He wasn't counting, but he was not included in there. So there's 7 people. There are exactly 7 people. And now there's someone's missing. So there's someone's not here. And they said, no, it's not like that. We've had any situations on the road. We haven't lost anyone. And so they all counted. They each counted everyone. But one person wasn't there. Well, they're missing someone. A really difficult situation. I was kind of like, I was overwhelmed by this. Like, what's something? How have they lost someone? Why is someone missing? And they were coming down, and so they were really worried the whole time. That they didn't sleep well at night. They were each kind of looking at each other, thinking someone's going to get lost. And so they were too busy watching each other, and they didn't sleep well. It's like really difficult. They had a really hard time. They eventually reached Lhasa. And when they got to Lhasa, they're all completely exhausted. They hadn't slept well. They'd been worrying the whole time. It's a really difficult time. They got to Lhasa. When they got to Lhasa finally, this is during the time of the 5th Dalai Lama. So they think, and maybe we should ask for a Mo divination from the 5th Dalai Lama. We better ask for we've lost someone. How is it? We can't find them at all. So they thought they have to go to the 5th Dalai Lama. This is what they said. But in order to make a request to the so they had to rewrite a letter. But none of them were literate. They hadn't studied at all. They didn't know how to write. They couldn't say, you're better, yours. So like that, they kind of put him much in. There's one of a little bit of education, and they made him write. And when he wrote it down, he said, he didn't know what to do. And he looked at the kanjur, like a brother kanjur, and says, and he opened it up. And then the kanjur, what it says at the beginning is, it says like the Buddha Bhagavan spake to Shariputra, and he said, oh, okay. Oh yeah, that's really beneficial to hear it down. We Mongolians in Radhanija the name speak to the 5th Dalai Lama. When we came from our homeland, there were 7 of us. But when we were counting on the way, we only had 6 people. So we've lost someone. But we didn't have any other misfortunes on the way. We can't find this extra person. So, since you are omniscient, please do divination. And please figure out where this person is. When they explained this, they offered the letter to the 5th Dalai Lama, and they went to see the 5th Dalai Lama. And when he came to them, they gave the letter to the Dalai Lama, and they stand. The Dalai Lama looked at them, and he looked at them, and he looked at the letter. He said, and he understood what the situation is. Now, he said, first of all, you will sit down. And he sat with them. He gave them some. They brought their cousin. He had them each put down their bowls in front of them, and said, and he said, how many cups do you have? He said, when they counted the number of bowls that they had, that were exactly 7. because the bowls were out front, so they weren't looking at themselves. They weren't thinking about themselves, they're looking out. And when counting those, they're counted exactly 7. So, oh, there are the 7 bowls. So you have 7 people, except you haven't lost anyone, he said. And they're like so completely surprised and amazed and saying, oh, he's definitely omniscient. You just thought about how we could lost him, we couldn't find them, but you found the person. This is what this story said. Now, I don't know whether this story is true or not, but it is told in one history. So this is the reason why I'm saying this is that when we look at the beginning of the text in the contract, what it's always written is, "Thus have I heard at one time." So this phrase comes up over. You always read it. And when you think of there's the first word, thus, evam in Sanskrit, there are many ways to explain it. And the most important way of explaining is that we say thus, or in this way. What it means is that it shows faith. It teaches that we need faith. And the reason for that is that when we say the Buddha spoke thus, or the Buddha taught the Dharma in this way, when we say this, if we have faith in this, then if we feel faith in it, if we feel confidence and belief, then that person will be able to enter the Dharma, be able to practice the Dharma. If we say that the Buddha has entered that the Buddha has said this, and the person thinks, oh, it can't be, must have been what the Buddha said. If someone thinks that, that person won't be able to enter the gate of the Dharma, won't be able to practice the Dharma. And so faith is incredibly important. In Chinese, there is a commentary on the Prajna Paramita in 100,000 lines by Nagarjuna that was translated into Chinese by the great translator Kumarajiva. And so this quotes a sutra, and what the sutra says, and I'm not going to read each word as exactly as, but the basic thing that it says is that faith is the same as our hands. You know, like people have hands, right? You have 2 hands. And just as you have the 2 hands, the faith is the same as our hands. If a person has hands, what they can do, if they go to an island of jewels and get to like this island, and it's an island, it's just, there's so many jewels like diamonds and everything, and this person, because they have hands, and they can take whatever they want, whatever they like, they can take them, take the jewels. Similarly, faith is like hands. If you have faith, then when you have the 5th, or like the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, these 7 factors of enlightenment, the paths, and so forth, these are like Dharma teachings that are like jewels. And you can practice whichever of them you want. If you don't have any faith, then you're the same as a person with no hands, because that person with no hands can get to an island where it's filled with the jewels, but can't pick up any of them. And so that's a lacking faith. If you don't have faith, you don't even really enter the Dharma. But if you were to try to, you can't do anything. Similarly, what it also says is that if a person has faith, then they can enter the Buddha's Dharma, and not only can they enter the Dharma, they can also achieve the results of the spiritual way. They can go forth and shave their head, wear the Dharma robes on their body, and it'll become meaningful. If you don't have faith, there's no way that you're going to enter the Dharma to begin with, and you won't be able to achieve any of the results of the spiritual way. And even if you wear the Dharma robes and read many sutras and become very skilled at, question and answers in the Dharma, but you won't get any result from the Dharma because they're just words. You won't actually know any of the meanings. So there's no benefit to it. And so for that reason, faith is like the number one condition for entering the gate of the Dharma. It's the most important condition. Likewise, that same commentary on the Prajna, but another important thing that it says is that the Buddha's Dharma is incredibly profound and it's incredibly vast. So other than the Tathagata, ordinary people cannot understand it completely. It's difficult for us to understand it completely. But if a person develops faith, even if they haven't awakened to Buddhahood, because of the power of the faith, then they can have confidence in the Buddha's Dharma and they will be able to enter the Buddha Dharma. So in this way, if you have faith, the Buddha Dharma is so profound and vast that we're unable to realize the entire nature and its all reasons right away. But through the power of faith, we will think that it's meaningful and that it's valuable, and we'll study it and we'll engage it, and then gradually we'll be able to develop realization of its meaning. And so, for that reason, for this reason, faith is absolutely crucial for beginners. Likewise, there's another important story that's for us, and this is also in the same commentary by Nagarjuna and the Prajnaparamita Sutra that was translated by Kumarajiva. When the Buddha was in Bodh Gaya and he had become enlightened, he didn't immediately teach the Dharma. He didn't teach right away. Down the time of it, between the time when he achieved Buddhahood and taught the Dharma, there was like a bit of time. There were several weeks where he didn't teach the Dharma. And while he was sitting there not teaching the Dharma, there's a Brahma, right? Brahma is the Hindu, the Brahma that the Hindus assert is the creator of the world. He came to Buddha and he said, please turn the wheel of Dharma. He said, basically saying, please teach the Dharma. When you say, please teach the Dharma, then at the first time when he made this request, the answer that the Buddha gave was that this true Dharma is incredibly profound. And it's very difficult to find. So there's no way that people are going to understand the meaning of the Dharma exactly as I have understood it. And then Brahma made a second reconsideration. You absolutely must turn the wheel of Dharma. And when he said this, then what the Buddha thought is, okay, all of the Buddhas of the three times, the past Buddhas such as Kanakavastu and Dipankara, they all taught the Dharma and turned the wheel of Dharma. And in the future as well, there'll be many other Buddhas who will turn the wheel of Dharma for the Buddhas. And then also, even at this time, there are many Buddhas in different universes who are turning the wheel of Dharma. So in this way, all of the Buddhas of the three times are teaching the Dharma. And so I also need to do as the other Buddhas do and turn the wheel of Dharma. And so he agreed, I'll turn the wheel of Dharma, he said. And at that point, the Buddha then said to Brahma, he said to this verse, and what this verse says is, today I shall teach the flavor of this nectar. Those with faith should rejoice. Now, today I shall teach them this true Dharma. And so the main point is what to say is, I'm going to teach the Dharma, is what he's saying. I'm teaching the Dharma, he said. I've decided I'm going to teach. And so, if you have faith in the true Dharma, if there's someone who has a true faith in the true Dharma, then you should rejoice. You should be excited. The Dharma that I'm teaching is for those who have faith and belief in the true Dharma. That's what he said. Now, this is in this great commentary translated by Kumarajiva. What it says, the reason why the Buddha said explicitly is those with faith should rejoice. He didn't say, you who are generous rejoice. You who keep discipline rejoice. You people who practice patience be diligent. You who are diligent be diligent. You who practice dhyana rejoice. Or have great pradhana, you should rejoice. He didn't say those. Instead, he said those of you who have faith. And the point that this comes down to is that when you talk about the true Dharma, it's extremely profound and it's very vast. So if you generally have ordinary people, even people with intelligence or prajna, it's difficult for them to understand completely the true Dharma. It's basically something that only can realize Buddhas. Ordinary people, no matter how intelligent, how much prajna they are, it's something that they cannot understand or realize. So, how it is that the Dharma, some people have some individuals who, if no one can understand it, if no one can understand, so who should he teach it to? He should teach it to those who have faith. The faithful. People, even if they don't understand 100%, then since the teacher is the Buddha saying, the Buddha is, because he's teaching it, then it must be so. There's no fault, there's no deception in what he's saying, no mistake there, then they'll be able to understand it. Other than that, if it's just merely by someone being generous or disciplined, there's no certainty that they're going to enter the Dharma. But someone who has faith is definitely going to be able to enter the Dharma. So for that reason, the Buddha said, for those with faith rejoice. And this is the reason why. So for this and for other reasons, faith is extremely important for beginners. Faith is absolutely invincible. It's like the seed of liberation. It's the gateway to the Dharma. It's extremely important. But these days, everyone says you have to analyze everything. No matter what, you have to examine it. You need to follow logic, we say. Now, to talk about following logic and using reasoning, if you have actual logic, we don't know whether we're actually talking about realism. If you haven't studied the Dharma, because we haven't studied the path, we don't have the logic that has it, but we use like a sort of pseudo-logic. It seems like we have reasons when we speak it orally. Just like the pseudo-logic, and we think that we have this idea that we can understand the whole nature of the Dharma. If you think about this, perhaps just a little bit overconfident. It's a little bit too audacious. And so for that reason, and so having faith for this reason is extremely important. And this is a really important, we need to consider a very crucial point. So when we look at these liberation stories of MIKYÖ DORJE, to continue with this topic, there are the two autobiographical verses, good deeds and he searched thoroughly. These were not written by some other individual, such as one of his students. They were written by MIKYÖ DORJE himself. And so they have a particular quality because of this. And what that quality is as when we talk about an autobiographical or an autobiographical liberation story that is written by the Lama themselves, it has a particular qualities. There is a student of Rangjung Dorje called Yawel Yungtenpa. And what he wrote is that most liberation stories written by students praise them so highly, they turn the guru into a charlatan. When most of this liberation stories written by students, they only praise their students. They go above and beyond in their praises, and they turn the guru into someone fake. So most of the students most of the liberation stories written by students have the fault of praising them too highly. What he says is that, as I know my own experience best, I shall write a bit. You're the one who knows your own life experiences best, right? And so Those are like the best source. And so the guru writes down there, when the guru writes their own liberation story, and so he knows what he was thinking. When they go to, he knows the deeds and activities he's done that others don't know about. But someone else can't write about them, right? So this is another quality of an autobiographical liberation story. Likewise, there's also the great Tibetan yogi and Mahasiddha Drupal Kimle. And what he said is that though they may deserve praise as one's guru, these multitudinous stories of doing what they did not may give fools faith, but they embrace the ways. This is Kunlek's liberation told naturally. So what he's saying here is that when you're praising the guru, you have to praise him there. The gurus are worthy of praise. They are worthy of praise. But when you they say that the gurus did things that the guru didn't do. If you say that, that might quite that might fool some foolish people, but wise people who have intelligence are going to laugh inside themselves. And so Drupal Kimle looks at liberation. I'm going to write my own liberation as exactly as without changing it. Drupal Kimle's liberation story. There are many liberation stories of Drupal Kimle, and some of these are a little, probably not quite so pure, so correct. But the ones I've seen, but what he's saying that there's a liberation system where he's written down what he did and what he remembered and what he thought as it was without changing it. This is one they should consider the most authoritative and the things. So fortunately, because the reason for this is that Drupal Kimle himself explained all of his qualities and faults exactly as they are without hiding them. And what other people said about him, he explained it. And so this is something that we should respect and consider authoritative. Likewise, there's a J. Barawa, Kuzenpeze. It is a new word for me to write my own liberation, but if someone else did, there'd be many meaningless stained words. It's not very comfortable to write one of those things because it's like you have to write good things about yourself. If someone says, please recite liberation, you have to write good things. If you write something bad about yourself, then the person who asked you is going to be disappointed. You have to write something good. If you don't have something good to say about yourself, then how can you write a good thing? And write that you've read, but you still write that you write, then it's fake. So it's a little bit difficult to write an autobiographical liberation story. Either you need to teach all your faults and qualities exactly as I, without hiding them at all, or otherwise, even if you have faults, you have to hide your faults and be someone who just shows off your qualities and be something like, so as Desha's like. So another sort of writing your own liberation stories is difficult. And so for these reasons, it's difficult to write your own autobiography, but if you make someone else to write it, then they're going to need there may be other passages, meaningless passages where the people write all sorts of things about oneself. So for this reason, autobiographical liberation stories are extremely important. The reason why they're so important and sacred is that many of them, but the main one is that one's own mind is not hidden to oneself. That you know yourself best, because we all know ourselves best. Then the one that we write ourselves can be the most complete and the most comfortable. And likewise, if the students write the liberation stories, they wish to praise the guru, and they say that the guru did these mysterious, had this clairvoyance, had these pure visions, and will relate many amazing things that the Lama didn't actually do. Then it's like they become false. And so there's like the Tibetan saying, a criticism from someone who doesn't know how to criticize is better than praise from someone who does not know how to praise. And so there's the danger that the liberation story will become like that. And so for that reason, And in fact, the autobiographical liberation stories are extremely important. Now, when we think about the liberation stories, of course, they're stories. But they're stories, they're oral tradition, of course, but that doesn't mean that they lack value or they're pointless. And the reason is that when you think about like the ancient Tibetan histories, what is said is that stories, riddles, and burn are because of these three that we can that the Tibetan history began with these stories, riddles, and burn. Likewise, in today's the great world religions such as Christianity and Islam, in all of their most important scriptures, there are many stories. Likewise, with our Buddhist tradition, we have the 9 types of scripture, or the 12 types of scripture. One of the sections is the Jataka tales. This is a very important category of Buddhist literature. And it primarily contains stories in previous lifetime. It gives many stories and accounts of the Buddha's previous lifetimes. And in particular, when we're teaching the true Dharma through stories, there's a really important point to this. And the reason for this is that everyone, whether young and old, they really like listening to stories. And when you teach through stories, then it's in histories, then it's easier for people to understand. Otherwise, if you're always teaching only about philosophy, things that people don't understand, using words they don't know, then people aren't going to understand what you're saying. When they don't understand, they can get bored, and then they won't have any interest. When I talk about philosophy, it's something for people who have education. It's something that ordinary people can't understand. So Buddhism, when you think about what is it, it's not just philosophy. It's really primarily a way of turning inward, looking inside, and taming one's own mind stream. And this practice is necessary for everyone, whether they have education or not. And it's something that's beneficial for us and practically in our human lifetime. So we need to use various different ways to bring people understandings of the Dharma. And instead, if you're always if we only use one method or one way, then and insist on doing that, then it wouldn't work for everyone. And so when we think of the liberation stories of the great masters, when we talk about the liberation stories of the past masters, they're stories. Of course, they're stories, but they are different than the ordinary stories, as I explained before, right? The liberation stories they're different than biographies of ordinary people. The liberation stories of great masters, it's like talk about how in their actual lifetime they practiced the Dharma. They give us an example of how we can practice. And so it's like their direct experiential expression. They're like living pith instructions. That is what the liberation stories of the Guru are like. And so the liberation stories of the great master, if we see them just as being mere stories, though, and what this has shown is that our level, the level of our being, is that we're only at the level of nature stories. We don't have any kind of. We only have this level of where we can listen to stories. That's all it is. So basically, what it means is that we ourselves have no qualities. We have no education. That's what it shows. It doesn't mean that the liberation stories of the great master of the past are pointless. So now I've said many different things already, but in base, for the next month, we will be speaking about the liberation stories of MIKYÖ DORJE, and there are the two. There's primarily the Gujjas, and then we're on the supplement to explain it with the research thoroughly. Now, where we left off the teaching of the autobiographical versus good deeds last year, it has three main sections. And among these three main sections, the first is the homage and the pledge to compose. The second is the nature of the biography. And the third is the conclusion. So these are the three main sections. So these three main sections. Now, among these, the main one is the second, the nature of the biography. That's the second one, the nature of the biography, has the preliminaries, how to do the Dharma, and the main part, how we practice the paths of the three types of individuals. These are the two main parts. And the word of these two, which were the second one, the main part, how we practice the paths of the three types of individuals. And this, how we practice the paths of the three types of individuals, as we divide this as three parts. It has the paths of the lesser individuals, how we practice the paths of the middling individuals, and how we practice the paths of the greater individuals. These are the three types. And so where we are among these three is we are in the third, how we practice the path of the greater type of individual. And with that path of the greater individual, what this has, and it has, if we divide this into three, this also has three sections. The first is the intention of rousing bodhicitta. The second is the action of meditation on the two types of meditation. And the third is how we train in the precepts of the two types of bodhicittas. We are speaking about the first. So in generally, when you're talking about the autobiographical good deeds, there are 33 good deeds. And so where we are now is we're at the ninth good deed. And what this is, if I read the verse, it says, I've explained this. I've already taught this already. I've already gone through the ninth good deed. All beings without distinction are the same as my parents. It is illogical to group them into factions of friend or foe. With uncontrolled love for beings in intolerable states, I thought, when can I bring them the benefit of true enlightenment? I think of this as one of my good deeds. So this is the ninth good deed, which I've already gone through. So tomorrow's next session, I'll begin with the 10th. So that is in terms of the autobiographical versus good deeds. So we need to know where we left off, right? Now, in terms of the praise, you search thoroughly. This has 9 stanzas. And among them, where we've got to in this one is, as I've gone through, last year I went through the 5th stanza. And what this one says, his mind never free from love and pangs of compassion, his wish for emancipation was utterly pure. He always despaired of suffering and its causes and pondered impermanence. To him I pray. And so from the day after tomorrow, I'll resume with the 6th. When I'm talking about tomorrow, so tomorrow is the day off. So actually we're starting. Originally we were planning to start on the 18th. But maybe we'd start with like since that's the anniversary of Marpa's passing away, I thought we could start with the celebrating the anniversary and then begin with the teaching on the 19th. But I think it's very important for us among all the kajis to have a standard or an agreement about the actual anniversaries of Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa. And so it's important for us kaiju scholars to actually to investigate. So we need to investigate it and research it. And we need to take great interest in this and determine when determine when their anniversaries, their passing into Parinirvana are. Hence, we need to have a standard or an agreement upon this. So actually, there's only one anniversary, but later, because of the changes over time, then gradually, then there are a couple of slightly different ways of identifying what the anniversaries are. So in actual fact, there's only one. It's not possible that there were two in ordinary people's appearances. And so we need to have an individual, but if we are able to have it determined, then then all Kajupas will be able to celebrate the anniversaries of Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa on the same day. And we'll all be able to to hold it together at the same time. That's my hope. And then if we do that, this is going to be pleasing to all of the Kagyu masters of the past. Instead, if all the Kagyus of her left, we say that we're saying they all separate into different and each has their own separate anniversary and they become different transitions on their own separate traditions, then I don't think that the Kagyu forefathers would be happy about that. So I think we need to have a standard, a unified. We need to have a standard historically. In the past, there's only one day of the Power of Venice. It's something we need to understand. Otherwise, if we need to understand that if we're say we're followers of the Kagyu and we don't know what the anniversaries of Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa's passing away is, then there's no greater disgrace than that. So for that reason, in the next few days, I thought I'd let you know to make a request to people to research what this is, and then we can gather the results of all of our different research. In the end, we can combine them, and when we gather them, we can have the Kagyu masters. I can offer to this and to this, and if we can all everyone express our opinions, and then in the end, if we can decide, and then from then on, as long as the Kagyu temper is in Baza, then we can say that the anniversaries are on this day. And so that everyone can agree on this. And if we are able to make a decision to determine that date, then I think that that's be very beneficial. And so for that reason, it's not something we can decide immediately. And so for that reason, I decided that we should postpone the puja that we would have had on the 18th. And so tomorrow is the day off. And so this is the reason why tomorrow is a day off. And so from the day after tomorrow, we will continue with the teaching. And so I think that that is enough for today. Thank you. So now we will have the dedication prayers.
Karma dani kewa tamjin do nyame dabo kajudan kepa pabin karma pe chiso gendo meje shu.